In a quiet suburban neighborhood tucked between rolling hills and perfectly trimmed lawns, lived a woman who had seen her fair share of struggles. This woman, let's call her the homeowner, inherited a modest piece of land from her late father. It wasn't much compared to the flashy homes nearby, but it meant everything to her. The house held memories, childhood laughter, family dinners, and countless moments that shaped who she was today. To her, it wasn't just property. It was home. Right next door stood Whispering Pines, an exclusive gated community known for its luxury estates. These weren't your average houses. They were sprawling mansions with pools, tennis courts, and even private movie theaters. At the heart of this upscale neighborhood was its president, a woman who seemed to have it all: wealth, influence, and a mansion that looked like something out of a magazine. Let's refer to her as the HOA president. She ruled the community with an iron fist, enforcing strict rules about everything from fence colors to mailbox designs. If you didn't follow her guidelines, you'd quickly find yourself on the wrong side of her temper. The homeowner tried to stay out of the drama. Her little house might not have fit in with the glitz and glamour of Whispering Pines, but she liked it that way. Life was peaceful until things started changing. For months, construction trucks rolled past her property at odd hours, kicking up clouds of dust that made it hard to breathe or keep the windows open. The noise was relentless hammering, drilling, and the constant hum of machinery. It felt like the entire world revolved around the HOA president's new mansion, perched high on a hill overlooking the subdivision. One day, frustrated by the chaos, the homeowner decided to confront the HOA president. She walked over to the edge of her yard where the two properties met and called out politely. "Excuse me," she said, trying to sound calm despite the irritation bubbling inside her. "I'm wondering if there's any way we could adjust the schedule for the construction work? The dust is really affecting my kids." The HOA president turned slowly, her designer sunglasses reflecting the sunlight. She gave the homeowner a dismissive once-over before replying with a smirk. "You know, maybe you should think about selling your place. This neighborhood isn't exactly suited for older homes." Her tone dripped with condescension, as if she were speaking to someone beneath her. The homeowner clenched her fists but forced herself to smile. "Thanks for the suggestion," she replied coolly, though her mind raced with anger. Who did this woman think she was? Just because she had money didn't mean she could treat others like they didn't matter. Still, the comment stuck with her. There was something off about the HOA president's behavior, something beyond rudeness. Over the following weeks, the homeowner couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Why did those construction trucks always seem to linger near her property line? And why did the HOA president avoid making eye contact whenever they crossed paths? Her suspicions deepened when she struck up a conversation with a local contractor who occasionally worked in the area. He mentioned how unusual it was for such a massive project to take so long, especially given the size of the HOA president's mansion. When the homeowner casually asked if he knew anything about the property lines, his expression changed. "Funny you should ask," he said, scratching his chin. "There've been rumors that some corners might have been cut during the planning stages. Nothing official, of course, but people talk." That night, the homeowner lay awake, staring at the ceiling. What if the rumors were true? What if the HOA president's mansion wasn't entirely on her own land? The thought gnawed at her until she finally decided to investigate further. Early the next morning, she contacted a professional surveyor to map out her property boundaries. When the results came back, the homeowner's stomach dropped. According to the official records, nearly half of the HOA president's mansion encroached onto her land, the same land that had been in her family for generations. Shock turned into disbelief, then anger. How could this happen? Had the HOA president known all along? Or was this some kind of mistake? Determined to get answers, the homeowner sought advice from a trusted lawyer she'd heard good things about. Sitting across from him in his office, she explained the situation, showing him the survey maps and sharing her concerns. The lawyer listened carefully, nodding as he studied the documents. "This is serious," he said after a long pause. "But here's the thing, we can't rush into this blindly. If we accuse her outright, she'll use her resources to fight back. We need to be smart about this." Together, they came up with a plan. Instead of confronting the HOA president directly, the homeowner would act as though nothing was wrong. She'd continue living her life while quietly gathering evidence to prove her case. They reviewed every document they could find: zoning, permits, building plans, even old photographs taken before the mansion was built. Each piece of information painted a clearer picture. One that suggested the HOA president had knowingly crossed the line. As the days passed, the homeowner watched the HOA president from afar. The woman carried on as usual, hosting lavish parties and barking orders at anyone who dared question her authority. To the outside world, she appeared untouchable. But the homeowner knew better. Beneath the surface of wealth and power lay secrets, and soon enough, those secrets would come to light. The homeowner knew she was onto something big, but proving it wouldn't be easy. She spent countless hours poring over documents, trying to piece together the puzzle. The surveyor's report was clear. Part of the HOA president's mansion was sitting on her land, but without solid evidence showing intent or wrongdoing. It would just look like a simple boundary error. And knowing the HOA president, simple wasn't going to cut it. This woman didn't get where she was by playing fair, and the homeowner had no illusions about how hard this fight would be. Her lawyer, a sharp-minded man who seemed to have seen every trick in the book, laid out their strategy during one of their meetings. "We need to make her move first," he said, leaning forward in his chair. "If we accuse her outright, she'll dig in her heels and throw everything she has at us. But if we can force her hand, get her to reveal what she's really up to, then we've got her." The plan was simple yet clever. Instead of confronting the HOA president directly, the homeowner would file a seemingly harmless request with the county planning department, a permit to build a small guest house on her property. Nothing extravagant, just a modest structure that wouldn't raise too many eyebrows. The idea was to act like any other homeowner looking to improve their property while quietly setting the stage for what was to come. Filing the permit application felt surreal. On paper, it looked routine, a few pages detailing the size, design, and location of the proposed guest house. But behind the scenes, it was anything but ordinary. Every detail was carefully chosen to stay within zoning laws while subtly challenging the HOA president's dominance. The homeowner even made sure the planned guest house would sit close enough to the disputed property line to catch the attention of anyone watching closely. It didn't take long for the trap to spring. Within days of submitting the application, the HOA president caught wind of the plans. True to form, she wasted no time intervening. Through the Homeowners Association, she filed an official objection to the project, claiming the proposed guest house would ruin the aesthetic harmony of the neighborhood. According to her, it was out of character with the surrounding properties and would lower property values across Whispering Pines. To the untrained eye, this might have seemed like just another power play from someone obsessed with control. But the homeowner saw it for what it truly was, confirmation that the HOA president cared more about protecting her own interests than fairness or transparency. After all, why would someone go to such lengths to block a tiny guest house unless they had something to hide? With the objection now officially on record, the homeowner escalated the situation. She filed a formal complaint against the HOA, accusing them of discrimination and bias. Along with the complaint, she included detailed maps, photographs, and affidavits proving that the HOA president's mansion encroached onto her land. She also highlighted inconsistencies in the original building permits, suggesting that corners had been cut or worse, rules broken during the construction process. This was the moment the homeowner had been waiting for. By tying the HOA president up in legal battles over the guesthouse issue, she forced her opponent to defend herself publicly. And as the layers of deception began to peel away, cracks started appearing in the polished facade the HOA president had worked so hard to maintain. The media soon picked up on the story, thanks in part to some strategic leaks from the homeowners. Local news outlets ran headlines questioning whether the HOA president had abused her position to benefit herself. Neighbors whispered behind closed doors, wondering how they hadn't noticed the red flags earlier. Some recalled how quickly the mansion had gone up, despite initial pushback from other residents. Others remembered strange discrepancies in the blueprints submitted during the planning phase. Meanwhile, the HOA president grew increasingly desperate. Her once confident demeanor gave way to irritation, then outright panic. She hired a team of high-profile lawyers to counter the allegations, but each attempt only dug her deeper into trouble. Documents surfaced showing irregularities in the approvals process. Emails revealed hasty communications between the HOA president and county officials, hinting at attempts to fast-track permits under questionable circumstances. Through it all, the homeowner remained calm and focused. She attended every meeting, answered every question, and stood firm in her resolve. Though the stress weighed heavily on her, she refused to back down. This wasn't just about reclaiming her land anymore. It was about standing up to someone who thought she was above the law. As the legal battle dragged on, the HOA president's grip on the community began to slip. Residents who had once feared her authority now questioned her motives. A few brave souls even came forward with their own grievances, adding fuel to the fire. The once unified front of Whispering Pines fractured under the weight of scandal, leaving the HOA president isolated and vulnerable. For the homeowner, the turning point came during a heated deposition. Under oath, the HOA president stumbled over her answers, unable to explain the glaring inconsistencies in her story. When confronted with photographic evidence showing her mansion crossing the property line, she resorted to vague denials and half-truths. It was a performance so transparently evasive that even her own lawyers exchanged uneasy glances. Back home, the homeowner allowed herself a rare moment of satisfaction. The pieces were falling into place, and the truth was finally coming to light. Still, she knew better than to celebrate too soon. Winning this fight wouldn't just require evidence, it would demand patience, persistence, and an unwavering belief in justice. Late one evening, as she sat on her porch watching the sunset, the homeowner reflected on how far she'd come. What began as a suspicion had grown into a full-blown investigation exposing corruption and abuse of power in a place where people assumed none existed. She thought about her father, whose legacy inspired her to hold on to the land no matter what. He always taught her to stand up for what was right, even when the odds seemed impossible. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new twists in the story. But for now, she let herself feel a flicker of hope. The HOA president's empire was crumbling, brick by brick. And when it finally fell, the homeowner knew she'd be ready to pick up the pieces, not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever felt powerless against someone like her. The homeowner's plan was working exactly as she and her lawyer had hoped. By filing the permit for a guest house, she had successfully baited the HOA president into reacting and overreacting. The objection filed by the HOA wasn't just a roadblock. It was a golden opportunity. It gave the homeowner a legitimate reason to escalate things further without looking like she was targeting anyone personally. If anything, it now appeared that the HOA president was the one picking a fight, but the homeowner knew this was only the beginning. She couldn't afford to let her guard down, not even for a second. Every move she made had to be calculated, every piece of evidence meticulously documented. This wasn't just about reclaiming her land anymore. It was about exposing the truth and holding someone accountable who thought they were untouchable. And the more the HOA president pushed back, the closer she came to stepping into the trap. Things heated up when the homeowner filed a formal complaint against the HOA. Along with the complaint, she submitted a mountain of evidence: survey maps showing the encroachment, old photographs taken before the mansion was built, copies of building permits riddled with inconsistencies, and sworn statements from neighbors who had witnessed suspicious activity during construction. Each document added another layer to the case, painting a picture that was impossible to ignore. The HOA president didn't take this lying down. Within days, she unleashed her team of expensive lawyers who immediately filed motions to dismiss the complaint. They argued that the homeowner's claims were baseless and that the guest house issue was nothing more than a petty squabble between neighbors. But the homeowner's lawyer was ready for them. He countered each motion with razor-sharp arguments backed by irrefutable facts. Slowly but surely, the legal tide began to turn in their favor. What the HOA president didn't realize was that every attempt to shut down the case only dug her deeper into trouble. For example, when her lawyers tried to dismiss the property line dispute as irrelevant, the homeowner's side produced an email chain showing how the HOA president had pressured county officials to approve her mansion plans despite clear boundary issues. When they claimed the guest house would harm property values, the homeowner's team presented expert testimony proving otherwise. Every defense the HOA president threw out there crumbled under scrutiny. As the weeks went by, the tension in the neighborhood reached a boiling point. Residents of Whispering Pines, once intimidated into silence, started paying attention. Some were curious, others skeptical, but most were shocked at what they were learning. Conversations at coffee shops and school pickups turned into debates about fairness, integrity, and whether anyone should have that much power over other people's lives. One neighbor, a retired teacher who lived 2 doors down, approached the homeowner one afternoon while she was watering her flowers. "I heard about what's going on," the neighbor said quietly, glancing around to make sure no one else was listening. "I've got to say, I never trusted her. Always throwing her weight around like she owns the place." The homeowner smiled, grateful for the support. "It's not easy standing up to someone like that," she admitted. "But you'd be surprised how many people are starting to speak up." Indeed, whispers were spreading fast. Another resident revealed that the HOA president had fined him unfairly for planting trees that technically didn't violate any rules. A young couple shared how she had threatened to evict them from the community pool after their toddler accidentally splashed water onto her designer shoes. Even the local contractor who had tipped off the homeowner about the property line rumors decided to come forward, sharing his concerns about shady practices he'd noticed during construction projects overseen by the HOA. With public opinion shifting, the HOA president found herself increasingly isolated. Her carefully crafted image of perfection was cracking, and she seemed powerless to stop it. At HOA meetings, which were usually dominated by her loud voice and controlling demeanor, attendees began questioning her decisions. One man stood up during a particularly heated session and demanded answers about the mansion controversy. "If you're so innocent, why don't you just show us the proof?" he challenged. The room erupted in murmurs of agreement, leaving the HOA president red-faced and fumbling for words. Behind closed doors, however, the battle was far from over. The legal process dragged on, with both sides exchanging accusations and counter-accusations. Depositions became tense showdowns where every word mattered. During one deposition, the homeowner's lawyer grilled the HOA president about discrepancies in the original building plans. "Can you explain why these measurements don't match the ones in your permit application?" he asked, sliding a set of documents across the table. The HOA president hesitated, visibly flustered. I'm not sure," she stammered. "That must have been a clerical error." "A clerical error?" the lawyer repeated, raising an eyebrow. "Or maybe it was intentional." Her face flushed with anger, but she didn't respond. Instead, she leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, refusing to answer further questions. It was a small victory, but a significant one. The cracks in her story were widening, and everyone in the room could see it. Meanwhile, the homeowner continued, living her life as normally as possible. On the surface, she seemed calm and composed, but inside, she was a whirlwind of emotions. There were moments of doubt. What if she lost? What if all her efforts amounted to nothing? Then there were moments of triumph, like when she received a call from her lawyer saying they'd uncovered yet another incriminating document. Through it all, she reminded herself why she was doing this. This wasn't just about her land. It was about justice. It was about showing that no matter how rich or powerful someone was, they couldn't trample over others without consequences. One evening, as she sat on her porch sipping tea, she reflected on how much had changed since this whole ordeal began. Her quiet little life had been turned upside down, but she felt stronger than ever. She thought about her father, whose determination and resilience had inspired her to hold on to the land he loved so much. "You'd be proud of me, Dad," she whispered softly. Gazing at the stars, the next morning she woke up with renewed energy. Today was another day in the fight, and she was ready. Little did she know, the biggest twist was yet to come. A revelation that would not only seal the HOA president's fate, but also restore faith in the community. The homeowner didn't need to rush. She knew the truth would eventually come out. And when it did, it would change everything. As the legal battle dragged on, the tension in Whispering Pines grew thicker than ever. The HOA president, once a towering figure of authority and control, was starting to crumble under the weight of mounting evidence. Her mansion, that symbol of wealth and power perched high on the hill, now felt like a house of cards teetering on the edge of collapse. For the homeowner, every small victory brought her closer to the truth and justice. But she knew the hardest battles were still ahead. The turning point came during a routine discovery phase of the lawsuit. This was the part where both sides exchanged documents and evidence, laying all their cards on the table. It was supposed to be straightforward, but what emerged from the HOA president's files shocked everyone involved. Hidden among stacks of permits, emails, and financial records was a smoking gun, proof that she had bribed a county official to falsify documents related to her mansion's construction. When the homeowner's lawyer first uncovered the email chain, he nearly fell out of his chair. The messages revealed how the HOA president had leaned on a local official, promising favors and even cash payments in exchange for altering property maps and approving permits despite glaring irregularities. One email read, "Make sure this gets done ASAP. We can't afford any delays." Another casually mentioned a bonus waiting for the official once the project was complete. The homeowner stared at the printed emails in disbelief. She'd suspected foul play, but this was beyond anything she'd imagined. It wasn't just about crossing a property line anymore, it was corruption, plain and simple. And it wasn't limited to the HOA president either. Several members of the HOA board were implicated too, their names scattered throughout the correspondence. They weren't just complicit. They were active participants in covering up the mess with this explosive new evidence, the homeowners. Lawyer wasted no time filing an amended complaint. Now the case wasn't just about reclaiming land, it was about exposing a web of deceit that stretched far beyond one woman's greed. The media latched onto the story immediately. Local news stations ran segments detailing how the HOA president had abused her position to build her dream home at the expense of others. Reporters interviewed neighbors who spoke candidly about years of intimidation and favoritism. One elderly resident summed it up perfectly. She thought she was above the law. Turns out nobody is. The fallout was swift and brutal. Within days, public outrage reached a fever pitch. Residents of Whispering Pines, who had long endured the HOA president's iron-fisted rule, finally found their voices. At a packed community meeting, homeowners stood up one by one to share their grievances. Some talked about exorbitant fines for minor infractions, like leaving trash cans visible for a few extra hours. Others recounted how they'd been denied permission to make reasonable improvements to their homes. While the HOA president flouted rules left and right, one particularly fiery moment came when a young father confronted the HOA president directly. "You fined me $500 because my kid's basketball hoop was unsightly," he said, his voice shaking with anger. "But your mansion sits half on someone else's land, and you didn't bat an eye. How does that make any sense?" The room erupted in applause, and for the first time, the HOA president looked genuinely rattled. She tried to defend herself, stammering something about misunderstandings and honest mistakes, but no one was buying it. By the end of the meeting, the HOA board held an emergency vote and unanimously decided to remove her as president. Just like that, the woman who had ruled Whispering Pines with an iron fist was stripped of her title and influence, but losing her position was only the beginning of her downfall. As more details of the scandal came to light, the HOA president became a pariah. Neighbors avoided her at all costs, and contractors who had once bent over backward to please her refused to take her calls. Even her closest allies distanced themselves, fearing association with her tarnished reputation. She stopped attending community events altogether, retreating into isolation behind the walls of her now infamous mansion. For the homeowner watching, the HOA president's empire crumble was deeply satisfying, but it wasn't just about revenge. Every step forward reinforced her belief that standing up for what's right, no matter how daunting, could lead to real change. Still, she remained cautious. Until the court made its final ruling, nothing was guaranteed. She couldn't afford to celebrate prematurely, not when so much was at stake. The climax of the case came during the trial itself. In front of a packed courtroom, the homeowner took the stand to tell her side of the story. She spoke calmly and clearly, recounting everything from inheriting the land to discovering the encroachment and fighting back against overwhelming odds. When asked why she hadn't backed down, despite facing such a powerful opponent, she paused. For a moment before answering, "This isn't just my land," she said, her voice steady. "It's my family's legacy. My dad worked hard for this place, and I promised him I'd protect it. But this fight isn't just about me, it's about showing that we all deserve fairness, no matter who we are or how much money we have." Her words resonated deeply, not just with the judge and jury, but with everyone in the room. Even some of the HOA president's former supporters admitted privately that they admired the homeowner's courage. The HOA president, on the other hand, struggled under cross-examination. Her arrogance gave way to defensiveness, and her answers grew increasingly erratic. When confronted with the damning emails, she tried to deny involvement, but the evidence was undeniable. By the time closing arguments rolled around, the outcome seemed inevitable. The judge delivered a scathing verdict, siding entirely with the homeowner. Not only did she regain full ownership of her land, but the court also ordered the HOA president to demolish the portion of her mansion that encroached onto the disputed property. Additionally, the HOA was required to implement sweeping reforms to ensure transparency and accountability moving forward. News of the ruling spread like wildfire. Residents of Whispering Pines cheered openly, celebrating the end of an era defined by fear and favoritism. For many, it felt like a fresh start, a chance to rebuild their community on principles of fairness and mutual respect. As for the HOA president, she disappeared from public life almost overnight. Rumors swirled that she had sold her mansion and moved away, though no one knew for sure. All anyone cared about was that she was gone for good. In the aftermath, the homeowner found herself thrust into the spotlight. People praised her bravery and determination, calling her a hero for taking on someone so powerful. Offers poured in from developers eager to buy her land, hoping to capitalize on its prime location. But she turned them all down. Money wasn't her motivation, justice was. Instead, she used part of the settlement funds to renovate her home, adding modern touches while preserving the charm that made it special to her family. More importantly, she channeled the rest of the money into helping others. She donated generously to local charities focused on affordable housing and legal aid for those fighting similar battles. To her, it was a way of paying forward the support she'd received from friends, neighbors, and strangers alike. Life slowly returned to normal, or as close to normal as it could be after such a whirlwind. The homeowner spent her days tending to her garden, playing with her kids, and enjoying the peace she'd fought so hard to preserve. Occasionally, she'd sit on her porch, sipping tea and watching the sunset, reflecting on everything she'd been through. What started as a suspicion had grown into a David and Goliath story that inspired countless others to stand up for themselves. And though she never sought fame or recognition, her actions prove that sometimes the quietest voices carry the most weight. The HOA president may have thought she was untouchable, but in the end, it was the homeowner's quiet strength and unwavering resolve that changed the course of history for herself, her family, and an entire community. The final chapter of this story wasn't just about reclaiming land or winning a court case, it was about closure, redemption, and rebuilding trust in a fractured community. After the judge's ruling, life in Whispering Pines began to shift in ways no one could have predicted. The homeowner, who had spent months fighting an uphill battle against someone with endless resources, suddenly found herself at the center of something much bigger than herself. Her victory wasn't just personal. It sparked a wave of change that rippled through the entire neighborhood. For starters, the HOA president vanished from public view almost immediately after the verdict. Some said she moved out of state, others whispered she changed her name to escape the scandal. Whatever. The truth, she left behind a mansion that loomed like a ghost over the hilltop. Workers arrived soon after the ruling to begin dismantling the portion of the house that encroached on the homeowner's property. It was a surreal sight, construction crews hacking away at what had once been a symbol of wealth and power. Neighbors gathered to watch, some snapping photos, others simply marveling at how quickly fortunes could turn. But the real transformation happened within the community itself. With the HOA president gone, residents of Whispering Pines seized the opportunity to rewrite the rules. They formed a new committee dedicated to fairness, transparency, and inclusivity, values that had long been absent under the old regime. This time, leadership wasn't handed to the wealthiest or most influential person. Instead, volunteers stepped forward, eager to contribute to a better future for everyone. The homeowner, despite her preference for staying out of the spotlight, was unanimously asked to serve as an advisor. She accepted, seeing it as a chance to ensure that no one else would ever face the kind of injustice she had endured. Under the new system, decisions were made collectively rather than dictated by a single authority figure. Homeowners felt empowered to voice their opinions without fear of retaliation. Fines for minor infractions were reduced and guidelines became more flexible, allowing people to personalize their properties while maintaining the neighborhood's charm. Even small gestures, like hosting monthly potlucks and organizing volunteer cleanup days, helped mend fences and foster a sense of camaraderie. For the first time in years, Whispering Pines truly felt like a community. As for the homeowner, she focused on healing and moving forward. Winning the legal battle brought a sense of vindication, but it also left emotional scars. There were nights when she lay awake replaying moments from the fight, the confrontations, the stress, the uncertainty. Yet, there were also mornings when she woke up feeling lighter, knowing she'd done the right thing. Her kids noticed the difference too. They saw their mom not just as a parent, but as someone willing to stand up for what mattered, even when it was hard. One day, while working in her garden, she received an unexpected visitor. It was the retired teacher who had approached her early in the dispute to express his doubts about the HOA president. He carried a potted plant wrapped in burlap and handed it to her with a sheepish smile. "I know it's not much," he said, "but I wanted to thank you for everything." She laughed softly, touched by the gesture. "You don't have to thank me," she replied. "We did this together, all of us." He nodded, glancing around at the blooming flowers and neatly trimmed hedges. "Still, I think you deserve something special. That plant is lavender. It's tough, resilient, and smells amazing. Kind of like you." Her eyes welled up, though she tried to hide it. "I'll take that as a compliment," she said, setting the plant down gently beside her tools. Word spread quickly about the exchange, and soon other neighbors followed suit. Someone dropped off fresh-baked cookies. Another left a handwritten note of gratitude tucked into her mailbox. These small acts of kindness reminded her why she had fought so hard, not for recognition, but because deep down she believed in the goodness of people. And now she was surrounded by proof that goodness existed, even in places where it had been buried beneath layers of fear and resentment. Over time, the homeowner settled into a rhythm of quiet contentment. She finished renovating her house, updating the kitchen and adding a cozy reading nook by the window. She planted new flowers in her garden, filling it with colors that brightened her mood every time she stepped outside. Life wasn't perfect. There were still challenges, both big and small, but she faced them with a renewed sense of purpose. Every sunset she watched from her porch felt like a gift, a reminder that persistence and integrity could overcome even the toughest obstacles. Years later, when the story of the HOA president and the disputed land had faded into local legend, the homeowner reflected on how far she'd come. What started as a suspicion about property lines had grown into a movement that united an entire community. She often thought about her father, whose love for the land had inspired her to hold on tight, even when letting go seemed easier. "You'd be proud," she whispered one evening, staring at the stars. "We didn't just win the fight, we built something better." And she was right. Whispering Pines wasn't just a neighborhood anymore. It was a testament to the power of standing up for what's right. The homeowner's courage had shown everyone that no matter how daunting the odds, justice could prevail if you refused to give up. Her story became a beacon of hope for anyone facing their own battles, proving that sometimes the smallest voices can make the biggest impact.